As is our tradition, we always start with the invocation. Debbie, who usually does the invocation, Debbie and Woody are not here today, so Henry's going to do the invocation for us. So, all rise, please.
Almighty God, we gather here this evening to remember our friends, our comrades who are no longer with us. We hope you will preserve a place for us in heaven. Make us, give our lives, to a credit to your service. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. If you will face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Henry. Be seated. All right, Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year. I didn't get to be here last month and regret it because Mark, our videographer, said it was fantastic. Everybody I talked to said I missed a really, really good one. And Mark is going to have DVDs ready by the next meeting. We'll put out a bunch of DVDs if anybody wants them. Got a really, really good meeting today. Ray Fowler is back there in the back. Ray is one of those guys who's a friend to many. He's a pilot's pilot. He flies more airplanes than most of us have driven cars. He's one of those guys where most of us wake up in the morning wishing we could be Ray Fowler. Yeah, Ray, that's true. You know that. It's going to be a really good presentation. He's the chief pilot for the Liberty Foundation, which is the B-17, the Liberty Bell, the airplane, and John Hess, who's also with us. John was our speaker about a year and a half ago, I guess now, John. John, he was the B-17, the Liberty Bell, now it's the Memphis Bell. Ray's also an F-16 pilot in the Alabama Air National Guard. He flies P-51 Mustangs and Spitfires and Focke-Wulfs and basically whatever has an engine, and he can. It's pretty amazing. It's fairly frustrating for most of us, but we're extremely happy to have him. Ray, thank you for being here, man. I know it's been tough to alter your schedule to be here, but it's going to be a very, very, very good presentation. While we're on that subject, our good friend Punchy Powell is not doing all that well, so I know we sent a bunch of birthday cards. So anytime anybody has an opportunity, we'd like to send a get well card. Punchy had a fall a while back. There's a fracture in an arm, and could stand some lifting of his spirits, I know for sure. So we are really going to try to get the group together and go over there and visit him sometime soon, because the reality is his health is failing. So keep him in your thoughts and prayers, and anybody has any desire to go with us, we're going to try to put a trip together in the next couple of weeks for sure. It's just over in Columbia, South Carolina. Every month I get asked, when are we going to Savannah again? These guys love to go to Savannah, in case you haven't been around this group. Henry Huey, our basically the godfather of the outfit here. Every time I talk to Henry about when would you like to do another Savannah trip, he says he needs at least 45 minutes notice. He's got a backpack by the door. We have not, and it's been, everybody's been extremely busy the latter half of this year. Last time we went was in August, and we're very much overdue for another Savannah trip. So if anybody has any ideas, any input on when they would like to do that, I'm up for any time in February. We can just everybody get their heads together and see what will work.
How about in the morning?
Henry's good to go tomorrow. And Greg, of course, said St. Patrick's Day. Maybe both. I think St. Patrick's Day might be hard to get the hotel on River Street. And tomorrow's out, it's gonna be cold. But I'm thinking early February, and sometime in February, we really need to do it, because this is the longest period of time we've gone without going. I mean, we typically go for 4 or 5 times a year. Last time we went, we had several people who had never been with us before, and just, it was a great time. We had a really good time. Went to a little fly-in community, had breakfast at a little EAA fly-in. It was something that we hadn't done before, and we can probably make that happen again, which we let these guys know that we're coming, and they roll out the red carpet. These guys don't like to think that that's the case, but you just alert the media that these guys are coming into town, and really neat things happen. That's all I have right now. Anybody else have any news for the? No one? I do want to welcome Bob McCreary. Bob's Silver Wings member. Bob, raise your hand if you would. Wave. Bob, thank you for being here. Bob was a helicopter pilot before helicopter pilots were cool. Bob, you flew Bell 47s and all that in Korea, right? Bob was a helicopter pilot in Korea, which is, and that was pretty serious duty, because they were still trying to figure out what made those things fly, weren't they? Sometimes they did, exactly. Right. John Hess brought his family, and good to have good to travel. Thank you. Rebecca Vaughn over here. Rebecca, thank you for being here. Brett met Rebecca at the World War II Roundtable. Rebecca's father was 8th Air Force, B-17 waist gunner, and she's writing a book on World War II, just the era. And she's come to interview some of our guys and just join the organization and get to see what it is that we do. So Rebecca, thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. Clifford Martin has brought I'm sorry, sir, I forgot your name.
Ed Millman.
Ed Millman. His father was B-24 top turret gunner and flight engineer. Pleasure to have you as well, sir. Look forward to hearing your stories. Thank you. That's all I have right now. Anyone have anything else? I think at this point we'll be ready to eat and then look forward to Ray's presentation here. Thank you. Before we actually get our speaker to the stage today, I got another late-breaking development that just brought to my attention, and this is quite cool. Rebecca Vaughn, our guest over here today, failed to tell us until lunchtime that her father was Rufus Youngblood, who was a waist gunner in the 91st Bomb Group, 324 Squadron, same as the Memphis Belle. And after the war, he was on the aircraft Jack the Ripper, which was a sister aircraft to one of the aircrafts that flew with the Memphis Belle. But after the war, very famous yet unfortunate occasion was John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Her father was Secret Service for Lyndon Baines Johnson and was on the airplane during his swearing in as the President of the United States in 1963. So there again, that's a pretty cool story. And we look forward to hearing you because you're going to be a speaker at some point. So we very much look forward to that. Thank you for sharing. All right, Ray, come on up, buddy. We'd love to have you tell your story. Most of us already know it.
Thank you, and I'm always humbled to get to come speak at these places because really, I look out here, and of course, obviously, I haven't had a chance to meet many of you, but talking and hearing the stories of folks that are that flew the airplanes that we get to fly today, it's again very humbling to be a part of that, and glad to do this. So I'll start out with a video. This is about 12 minutes long, and I'll just give you a quick how this ended up on the internet. So I did have a chance to have had 4 deployments. My last deployment was a little over a year ago to Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. It was a presidential activation. Thank you to our president for that. So since I'm in the Air National Guard, typically we would go over and not be activated, but however we would split our deployment with other units, so it's really not a burden on the traditional and part-time people in the Guard that go, and I can talk about that a little bit. But They said, congratulations, you are all going over for 6 months. So we got to go over for 6 months to Bagram, and it was an interesting time. That's when they were having the elections. So in our 6 months over there, we dropped more bombs than our unit has collectively in 6 months since it was stood up in World War II. Not to mention the fact that we put over 1,000 hours on each airplane. So I personally put 500 hours in the F-16 in 6 months, which that's a lot of time in a fighter. So we did a lot of flying. But while we were over there, we are in the 100th Fighter Squadron, so everyone probably knows the story of the 100th with the Tuskegee. So we picked that lineage up of the Tuskegee Red Tails, being close to Tuskegee over in Montgomery. So they said, we would like to put something out for Air Force Network, and can you carry a camera in the F-16 in combat? Well, that's a really, that's one of the big no-nos, is getting to go film stuff and carry a camera in the cockpit. Well, me and one other person was asked to do it, since I've gotten a chance to do it with several of the airplanes and Warbirds over the years, so they figured I could probably get away with doing it and not screw up and make the unit look bad. So we were able to carry cameras and take pictures. We figured it was all internal, it would never get released to the public, no one would ever see it. And so fast forward, we were back home and someone called and said, well, I just saw you on YouTube. And I'm like, you didn't see me on YouTube, because I don't put anything out on social media. I'm kind of antisocial. But what had happened is the Air Force actually put this together and they put it out. So, and they were nice enough to put our names on it. So for all the Al-Qaeda and people that are trying to kill us, that was nice too. So this is about, this is a pretty nice video. Again, it's running time's about 14 minutes. That way I don't have to speak as much, and then you guys can ask as many questions as you want.
Every fighter pilot remembers the first time they deployed in combat and how special that moment was, because all your life you've wanted to do something. And fighter pilot is not just a job, it's an attitude, it's a mentality.
On the one hand, you feel a sense of accomplishment at doing a thing that you've been training to do it right and to do it well on your first try or your first time you're really tested. On the other hand, you are, for the first time in your life, dealing with situations that are matters of life and death for people.
You realize how ops are different here in a deployed environment than they are back home. But you've never really had the experience to try your hand at any of those. How do you deal with responsibilities that you might have around here that aren't the same as back home?
I grew up very quickly based on some of the deployments I did when I was a younger aviator in my career. It all boils down to a handful of sorties to where you make a difference, you personally make a difference, your flight makes a difference.
Guess what?
Mission ends.
VFR. All right. Wow. Gorgeous. No issues. All right, so you guys are signed out. Done your caps. Some of the situations that you hear about and you hope you never find yourself in. I was flying with Hollywood. We're out doing some base defense type stuff, kind of low key, watching over, looking at different sites when we got the call that there was a troops in contact about, say, 40, 50 miles away, which only takes us about 5 minutes to get there.
Be advised, we just had a medevac, multiple Americans wounded.
We checked in. These guys are obviously, they're screaming. They had taken casualties.
As soon as I key in the frequency to go to talk to the JTAC, you can hear the screaming in the background. You can hear the bullets firing in the background. You can hear him breathing heavy because he is running.
We heard the dreaded words, danger close, which meaning we're going to be employing, in essence, right in the middle of their fight.
The comms were terrible. I don't know if it's because his antenna's bouncing around as he's running down the streets trying to avoid fire, but I'm getting half of it. Hollywood's getting half of it.
Well, our guys are getting shot up. We need those buildings dropped now.
We were trying to sort this out. It was very hectic, and our comfort level of where these bombs would go was not completely there yet.
He's clipping for me, and I'm not comfortable dropping this bomb until we find out exactly what they want in the middle of a town.
We're trying to piece this together, and the one thing I will never forget is if you don't drop those effing bombs right now, Americans are going to die.
Americans are going to die if you don't drop the bomb.
And at the time, you want to absolutely make sure. The worst thing for any fighter pilot or anyone in this type of scenario would be to drop and to hurt or kill friendly people on the ground.
We finally got it all together and able to put down a bomb, and you could just hear the calm in his voice.
Sniper, good effect.
And it was a big sigh of relief. We landed and were met by the squadron commander they had already called to let us know that what we did that day saved American lives.
You have an entire wing full of professionals that are out there representing Alabamians as well as the country to do it right, and that's kind of our unwritten pledge to them that we are professionals, we are going to do this right and execute the mission and come home with honor.
And so you fly with these guys, and you want to do everything perfect. Drop bombs where they need to go, be in perfect formation, be visual, be on the right radio channel, doing everything right, because you don't want to let these guys down. And that, I think, is probably more important than anything, and a driving force for a young, inexperienced wingman, is that you can't let these guys down. So there he is. I guess I'll stop talking about him.
No, don't stop talking about it. Unless it's all bad.
That's what we want, is for the young guys to look up to us, to see us doing it right. So obviously that's incumbent on us to make sure that we set a good example, do things right as much as possible, and then that's the example that they see, and then they strive to also do at least as well, if not better.
We are lucky to have two very solid lieutenants. They've come over here and they performed extremely well, and don't tell them I said that. That level of confidence of being here after the first time that they got to employ in true combat, and the first time they take off over enemy territory, knowing that in a single engine aircraft, if I take a bird, if I have an oil problem, I might be dropping down into enemy territory, and it's going to be a while before I'm picked up. I remember those nerves the first time I flew across the border into Iraq, and they have handled that extremely well and gotten past that and actually employed and have done phenomenal on their employments.
The first time I stepped to an F-16 by myself was an amazing experience. To be walking out to a jet, essentially holding the keys to the aircraft by yourself, no one with you to keep an eye on you. And now to be doing it here in combat is an incredible feeling of responsibility. Certainly I am reminded often personally of the fact that I graduated pilot training only 2 years ago. I graduated F-16 training a year ago, and now here I am doing it for real. It feels like a lot of responsibility, and it's an honor to be given that and to be entrusted with it. So, I mean, this jet is amazing, and I'm going to be in charge of it tonight, so you got to do everything right. Hey guys, what's up?
The experiences that Split and I have gained over the course of this deployment are ones that you can only gain on deployment. Be it the flight hours, be it the working with JTACs, be it the comm problems that you have with the high terrain around here. Those are things that you can talk about back home, you can train to back home, but the state of Alabama is a pretty flat place. We certainly don't have any 18, 20,000 foot mountains around there, disrupting your comm, disrupting your line of sight. And so you take away experiences from here that you can't simulate very accurately back home. And having gone out here, having had the opportunity to actually work with guys on the ground, to make a difference in people's lives, to drop ordnance and to make strafing runs that are going to ensure that people go home to their families is a pretty awesome experience.
Good hit, good hit.
Everybody's been there as a lieutenant, and so to see those guys, knowing when they come back and the training they get and the experience they get, they're going to do well. But a great parallel is to think of World War II when guys were 19 years old and they came out with 100 hours of flying time, and they were handed an airplane, a single seat P-51, and they were sent to war.
A lot of brave men who took some pretty difficult steps at a very, very challenging time to make it possible for guys like myself to be here flying today.
They fought very different wars. Their bravery was a different kind of bravery than ours, a lot more sometimes in the face of the enemy. And that's something that I think all of us still respect. It still commands respect today.
Our squadron, we're the 100th Fighter Squadron, which is one of the 4 original fighter squadrons that were part of the 332nd Group that comprised the majority of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Most everybody knows the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. They were the Red Tails. They were the all-black squadron in World War II that performed outstanding, providing support for the bomber missions.
And it initially was an experiment to see if, can someone who's black fly an airplane and go and be successful in combat? And obviously the short answer is yes. And they not only did it, they did it very well, exceptionally well.
And you fast forward that through several iterations of fighter aircraft, and now we have the F-16, a single-seat, single-engine multi-role fighter aircraft of the same lineage, same 100th Fighter Squadron. And we're here now in Bagram, Afghanistan, doing the same thing, taking the fight to the enemies of our nation and supporting the men and women on the ground in close air support.
One thing that I think this unit is very good at is stressing that there's a particular standard that needs to be met. And then within the squadron itself, as far as doing their particular jobs, everybody also understands that their piece is a critical niche of everything that goes on for the squadron and in the squadron.
I'm proud of what I did over here, and I know everybody else is too, because a well-maintained aircraft always makes the pilot feel more comfortable when they're flying, feel safer, and makes them feel like they can get their job done better in a safer manner.
The bottom line is they all understand what it means to be professional, and they are the ones who are motivated to perform that way. They know what their jobs are, they know how to do them and do them well.
There's always a legacy to uphold, but there's also your own legacy that you leave behind. What you do now reflects your life later on in the future.
And it's all part of being from the South. It's part of our pride to let people know that the state of Alabama was here and to leave a good name and to set the standard high for the other units to come in and fill in behind us.
For me personally, coming over here for 6 months, away from family, has been a challenge, and it really makes you reckon with what it means to serve and what it means to be willing to answer your country's call to duty.
I mean, that's something that I had heard about, that people talk about, but something that, you never know until you actually felt it. Till you hear gunfire going off in the background over this guy's radio, and you drop a bomb, and it stops. And when he picks up, they get their stuff together, and they're like, all right, we're gonna press on with the exfil. That's a feeling that people had talked about, but having felt it now, it's pretty amazing.
I think when guys looked up and they could see P-51s supporting them, the P-51 obviously did ground attack. When they could hear that P-51 coming overhead, I'm sure those guys on the ground, which had incredibly unfavorable odds on any given day that they went out to go fight, it made a difference in their lives. The F-16 and the role that we perform today, and specifically the role we perform in Afghanistan, which has to do with close air support, supporting U.S. coalition Afghan forces on the ground. The airplane is the difference. I mean, we own the sky.
I think they take great pride not only in the close air support that the original Red Tails performed, and I think this unit takes that performance and that combat record to heart, and they're not going to do anything to taint that record. But they definitely came here, wherever it emanated from, they came here with a sense of purpose. And their sense of purpose was to represent their unit, their state, and their nation and their Air Force incredibly well. And you can see that very, very conscious of the character of their service and the character of their performance.
The Tuskegee Airmen had to battle a lot of different things in order to be fighter pilots, not just learning how to fly and learning how to employ a fighter aircraft in combat, but they also had to overcome all the racial tension and stereotypes that existed in America But at the end of the day, the most important thing was what kind of pilot were they, what kind of excellence did they have, how did they fly the mission, how did they fight, and that's what truly determined the success for those 996 airmen who graduated the Tuskegee experiment. And the exact same thing holds true today with Split and Lefty. Everything that they do is going to be heavily scrutinized, and at the end of the day, as long as they meet or exceed the standard of the 100th Fighter Squadron, then they will continue to be successful here, and they will continue to do well. And I have every confidence in both of those young men that they will do just that.
Very good. Well, hopefully that gives you a good idea of the Thank you. So I'll just spend a few minutes and tell you a little bit about myself and give you a little background, and then I'll open the floor up for you guys to ask questions. Again, like our young crew chief that made that comment, you know, every time I hear that, the few times I've seen this video about that they have a, what they do today really shapes the future, and then we have a legacy to uphold. So I look around, and obviously, and for everyone, especially with the 8th Air Force and those who've served, I mean, we're here, and our quality of life is because of what you accomplished. And I would like to think that my role, even though I went kicking and screaming to Afghanistan, not that I wanted to go, that all the work that we did hopefully would also shape the future and make this world a safer place. So, and again, political issues aside, I think that this is something that has to be done, and obviously the people that go over there, we're an all-volunteer force, and I don't think the volunteerism is where it was in World War II. I mean, that's where everyone wanted to go and do their part. I think patriotism is not anywhere near where it was, however, it is still all-time high. So about Afghanistan, a couple of things. Obviously, my call sign is Hollywood. So if you heard that, you don't name yourself, and I'm not going to tell you how I got that name. But so you heard Hollywood, Lefty, Split, some of the names there where you come up with that. But I've been in the Air National Guard for 17 years, so I've got about 3 more years, and then as long as they let me keep flying the F-16, I will keep doing it. And if I can push a walker out to that airplane and get it and go fly it, I'll keep flying. It is an incredible airplane to fly. Again, before I got into the military, I was very blessed early on, and it was not my cunning skill as a pilot, but really a lot of luck that got me the opportunity to fly the older World War II airplanes. So when I was 18 years old, a gentleman owned a Japanese Cape torpedo bomber. He lost his medical at the time, and I was legal to make him fly his airplane. I just would go clean it and clean the bugs off, and just for the hope to get in it and go fly. So all of a sudden, I had the FAA qualifications applied, even though I couldn't taxi the airplane, much less fly it. But I made him legal to go fly. So that's what started me into flying. And then a gentleman that was going to be here today, unfortunately, Steve Collins, had a T6, and I started flying that airplane, giving rides, and he bought a P-51, and for some unknown reason, he let me fly a P-51 relatively young. And again, I was just very fortunate. But again, I would go to these places, I would go to air shows, I would get to meet these veterans, and and I got to play a fighter pilot on TV, but I really wasn't one. So, but I just like I'm sure many of you were when you were younger, had a call to serve. I said I need to do this, so I started looking at what are my options. I actually took an Air Force pilot training slot, and they got banked, and they put me and said you might get pilot training in a year, which led me to the Air National Guard. So I was hired in as what we call a guard baby. So they hired me into pilot training into the District of Columbia Air National Guard based at Andrews Air Force Base, and they shipped me off just like everybody else to go to pilot training. And I was able to get qualified in the F-16, and here I am 17 years later still getting to fly. So the Guard is a great deal in the standpoint you get to stay in your airplane, assuming your unit does not transfer different airplanes or they don't close their doors, you get to stay in your airplane. So it's a great way to stay in an airplane, it's a little bit older where it is a young man's game to go out there and pull all those G's and have fun, but I can still keep up with the young guys. Our 2 lieutenants you saw in there, which again, they did a wonderful job as well. You have to grow up very quickly, as I'm sure in World War II, at 19 years old, you had a lot of responsibility, you had to grow up very quickly. Well, I look at these guys, even with me as a lieutenant, I'm not sure if I knew what I was doing, and these guys get put into an incredible circumstance, and it is surreal to walk out to that airplane in the middle of the night. And if I look really tired in that video, that's because it was 1 in the morning. I just woke up and I was getting ready to go out on a 6-hour sortie from there. So we flew 24-hour day ops, and those guys would get in that airplane, and usually you would find yourself by yourself getting ready to deploy ordnance with no help with your flight lead on a tanker somewhere. And these wingmen, they had to make decisions that, you know, again, it was incredible odds for that. So they did a really wonderful job. In fact, the guy with the little funny mustache, Lefty, you know, I always tell the story. Right before we left, he did such good work and dropped a lot of bombs, and we had a phenomenal trip there. But right before we left, he was hooked up to the tanker, and the tanker malfunctioned. It didn't take the boom off the back of the receptacle. So when he moved out, he didn't go out. He went over, and it broke the boom off of the tanker, and actually was still attached to his airplane. So we gave him a real hard time about that. And on the T-walls over there where you paint, you paint all the bombs you dropped, all the bullets you shot. We actually painted a boom to show that he killed a boom from the tanker. And poor guy, to this day, you know, we were gonna rename him, but you can't do that after you've been in combat. But I just think it's funny. Poor guy, we said he's the only one that took off and landed with more ordnance than he took off with in combat. So, but anyway, it's all in good fun. I mean, the camaraderie is still there. It's an amazing thing to get the chance to do. But again, before I did this, I didn't think I'd earned my place to sit at the table. And again, it's still embarrassing when I get up to go talk. I would rather be on the other side listening to you guys talk than hear myself. But I have been very blessed, not so much from the military side and getting to go to combat. I mean, that's obviously a neat deal, but also just my involvement with multiple museums, with my involvement with the 8th Air Force. You know, I look back on any one of probably a dozen things that I could stand up here and talk about that I've been able to be just a small part of. Like taking the B-17 in 2008 over to Europe. So I got to cross the North Atlantic in the B-17, and John actually came out and flew back with me for doing that trip. And you know, just that one trip alone is historic, and being a part of that, to go over and land and over in Duxford on July 4th is amazing. So the Liberty Foundation, we mentioned the Memphis Bell and the Liberty Bell. So I know John spoke some time ago about that we had the fire with the Liberty Bell, which we're restoring that airplane. We do operate the movie Memphis Belle that was used in the Warner Brothers movie over 20 years ago now. So we have that airplane just north of Atlanta, and we usually tour that around the country. And really that is a tribute to all the veterans that served, you know, in the 8th Air Force and that continue to serve. It's just an amazing airplane to represent, you know, the 8th Air Force and to represent World War II veterans. So again, I will open the floor. If anyone has any questions, this would be a good time to ask, and I'll be glad to tell you about the F-16. If we had F-16 in World War II, I think it could have been over a whole lot quicker, because we don't miss now. So what took obviously hundreds of airplanes and thousands of bombs, now we have GPS guided bombs, and you can pull the coordinate for this podium in this room, and I can drop a bomb and it will land right in the middle of this podium, and that's from 35,000 feet, which is pretty amazing. So it's kind of nice to not miss, and it makes bombing very much now, not just from a standpoint of precision and using less bombs, but also since we're employing in such close proximity to our troops. That's the scary part of this, is obviously you don't want to have any kind of friendly fire incidents. While I was over there, we did have that. A B-1 actually dropped and killed some Americans, and it wasn't their fault. It was just those guys getting in a rush when they're under combat and they pass bad coordinates, and obviously it got some of our good guys killed. So it's kind of nice when you push that button knowing that bomb's going to go where it's supposed to go, particularly, since we're dropping around a lot of friendly forces on the ground, but obviously, people that live there that really don't want to get caught up in this, and I know that's just part of it. But any questions that anyone has? Another thing that makes it easy. Yes, sir.
From my understanding, you also did strafing in addition to bombing.
Yes.
That seems like that would put you at a much greater risk. What would be the reason for that? Is that for closer or more fidelity in targeting?
Well, it's a great question, and actually the strafe run you saw, that was my strafe run on the video there for me doing that. So there were a couple reasons. The rules, as you can imagine, the rules of engagement now are incredibly complex. So we always kid they need to have a second airplane, the F-16, so we can carry an attorney with us before we push that button, just to make sure we've done it. We slip the paperwork back and forth before we drop. So we have a 20mm cannon. It is considered indirect fire weapon. So if guys are in and we're carrying 500-pound class bombs. So if something happens, we can very quickly strafe without having to go through additional approval, notwithstanding self-defense. But if you're going to drop a bomb on someone, you have to go through a whole lot of different wickets of authorizations to drop that bomb, where you can strafe very quickly. Now, it does expose us a little bit. Fortunately, these guys are not real. They're smart enough not to shoot at F-16s, and we're going pretty fast. I mean, we're doing that strafe run. I'm doing probably 550 knots, fast as you can go. So even though they are shooting at you, you're really not that exposed like you would be in some other theaters. Now, the A-10s, those guys are bullet magnets, but again, they're smart enough not to shoot at the A-10s because they have a real serious gun, that 30-millimeter gun, and it is a crowd pleaser. So when you shoot at someone, typically those guys shoot back, and they shoot back fast. So we enjoyed it. I would say the F-16 gun is not the best weapon to use, and there's one of probably 10 stories that I could tell about where we strafed some guys in a wash because we couldn't get approval to drop a bomb. It's not easy to hit people on the ground with an F-16 doing over 500 knots with a gun, so the bomb would have been a better weapon. It's just a matter of the approval process it takes to drop that bomb, unless guys are in self-defense, and that's really what we got stuck in on that deal with the troops in contact, where these guys were screaming for their lives, and we had to drop a bomb, which was a little different deal. Then you do whatever it takes to save those guys' lives. But that's a good question. Anyone else? You go ahead, sir.
What was your average bombing altitude?
Average bombing altitude would probably be in the 20 to 30,000 foot range. And we can, if it's a GPS guided bomb, the only thing for going lower for us is we have a targeting pod on the front, so we're actually looking for target, particularly people, and a lot of times our targets would be bad guy people. It's very difficult for us to see when we get in the 30,000 foot range. So if we come down a little bit, we have a little better video. Unfortunately, our display is not real big. It's a very small display in the F-16. So if you're looking in it, you would want to be down closer to 20,000 feet because you can see better and you can see what you're dropping on for that. But fortunately, they have all kinds of other assets over there. King Airs, Predators. I mean, the future is unmanned, of course, which is sad for any pilots. We don't want to sit in a trailer and fly. We want to go out and fly ourselves. But those airplanes have incredible, they're sitting there with a screen that big, and they can look at things, and they can find people, and then they can give us coordinates to drop on. So if that was the case, if we're just dropping coordinates, we could drop above every threat system. And fortunately in Afghanistan, talking about owning the sky, we own every part of it, so we don't have to worry about being threatened. The small arms, anything they could shoot at us, as long as our engine didn't quit, and that was the biggest thing. You look at the terrain around there is unbelievable. So 20,000 foot mountains, if your engine just quit for whatever reason, non-combat related, your chances of rescue are very small, and your chances of getting your head cut off are pretty high. So it's not something you would necessarily want to have happen. So I kid we would cover up our blood pressure gauge so I couldn't see what that thing was doing while I was flying, because there's nothing you could do about it anyway. That's a good question. John?
Just wondering, you mentioned 500-pound bombs. What could an F-16 carry in comparison to maybe a B-17 or B-24 or a bomber of World War II?
Well, real good question. So we obviously the B-17 had like a 6,000-pound bomb load. We can take off with 2,000-pound bombs or 4,000 total under the wings. The problem is, and we did this in Iraq, is if you drop one of them, you have an asymmetry problem for landings. You'd have to drop both bombs. And also, with if you look at the gear on the F-16, it's kind of a spindly looking gear, so it's not real good to come back with those bombs. So we would take off with 4 of the 500-pound bombs. They're very effective, and they're very smart for fusing, and the options we can put on those bombs, but we can also bring them back. So when we land at Bagram, the altitude was 6,000 feet of the field. So you come back with 2,000 pounds of bombs plus gas plus a really hot day and everything. You come over the numbers. You're doing about over 200 across the ground. So it's one of those things that's the big consideration for the bombs. Not to mention all the today it's all about precision bombing. So they want to do as little or no collateral damage as possible. So the big directive over there was no civilian casualties. And of course we know that happens in war. The problem is everything's propaganda, right? So now even if you're right, if you drop a bomb and it hurts or kills somebody else, they're the first one to put it out on the internet, dragging some kid across the street that got caught up in something, even though it happened based on because they put them in that situation to begin with. So that was the directive. So the 500-pound bomb was really good too for being very precise in what we could do. And we carried actually one of the bombs. This is actually unique. Is just like the bombs in World War II, they're made out of metal, right? We actually would carry a bomb that's kind of like a porcelain bomb. So it was just concussion. So you could drop on someone right next to a building and it would do no damage, shrapnel damage. It was all concussion. And it was specifically for troops out in the open that would do very little damage to structures or anybody other. So kind of very, very smart munitions we have these days, especially the fusing. It's just unbelievable what you can do in the fusing for the bomb. You can send the bomb out there and tell it to go off 6 hours later if you wanted to. So it's just amazing what it does. Yes, sir.
With your combat experience, how does that make you appreciate, understand, or try to carry on the lineage when you're flying Warbirds?
I think the biggest way is you look at the difference in the technologies forward. So everyone, even if you've never been in combat or if you've ever had an opportunity to serve, there's a lot of people that have these airplanes, they represent the airplanes, they've never served, but they still pretty much, they still keep that lineage and that heritage alive. So again, and I know people that have served that never had a chance to go to combat. It's just luck of the draw. So I don't know if I was lucky or not lucky to get to go over these multiple times, but I think it helped me a little more to appreciate not only what I had done, but what they have done, which, the odds were far higher, in World War II. And I can't imagine on any given day that I stepped out in an F-16, in my air-conditioned cockpit with all the resources and relatively low threat. You get in that airplane, you strap in, and it just makes you think about the guys that did this in years, in wars prior to this, and really did it with the odds they did it, and just, you just kind of relate to that a little better. So, and again, it was an honor to be a part of that and to do our part. And again, I'm hoping that everything we're doing in the Middle East, I'm not so sure that I think we're backing up over there, of course, but I hope my sons, I have 3 sons, I don't want them to have to go back over there. So that'd be the biggest thing. I would love for us to be out of that and be out of that whole region, and that way my sons, your sons, your grandsons, anyone else that don't have to go back and do the same thing, repeat the same mistakes. Yeah, good question. Yes, sir.
For a 6-hour mission, how many refueling areas would you do?
Pretty much every hour. So we would hit the tankers every hour just so we would have enough fuel, and then based on contingencies, if you took off, and sometimes you would take off and immediately get put into a situation so that they would call a priority target, and you would run over there. So you may go to the tanker immediately as soon as you take off to go over and get gas, or send your wingman to the tanker so you're full based on what the operation is. So yeah, but you're hooked up to that tanker. We did, we did probably, might have done 600 refuelings while I was over there. So I got very good at hooking up to the tanker, to say the least.
You take your own tanker outfit from Birmingham?
We did not. They did have airplanes over there from Birmingham, but we flew our airplanes over and our airplanes back. But the tanker units, they borrow steel units from other, all over. So they were Birmingham tankers there, but they weren't necessarily flown by Birmingham pilots over there. So we would see pretty much every tail squadron on these tankers, because again, that you talk about being busy. If you're a tanker pilot over the past 5 or 6 years, you're coming and going over there all the time, and those airplanes are just, boy, it's amazing how much time they're doing. A lot of the airplanes, the B-1s, the F-15s, they're flying out of Al-Udeid, which is just south of Iraq. So they take 2 hours just to even get into Afghanistan of flying, and then they fly for 4 hours, and then they fly 2 hours to get home. And all the tankers do that as well. So because that's where you get the gas. There's nowhere else, even in Afghanistan, they can't, even when they try to truck gas in there, the guys blow the tankers up on the road. So, the logistics behind it is just unbelievable. Hard to believe we're able to even move that much gas in to keep our airplanes going. Of course, they have to fly all that gas into Bagram for us to have enough fuel to even get off the ground and go to the tanker. But there's tankers all over that place flying. Even right now, they're flying, supporting our guys over there. But that's why we get some pictures with the Alabama airplane. When we get up to it, we try to get pictures just because it looked nice with Alabama jets and Alabama tanker tail.
Well, before you leave the tankers, they were having a big hassle about what aircraft they were going to use for tankers. It was going to be an Airbus or a Boeing.
What they finally decide?
I don't think it's been decided. There's a lot of politics behind that because they were talking about going to Airbus, and then obviously Boeing got involved with it, and I don't think that they have quite came up with who's going to get the money for that. The airplanes we're hooking up, it is amazing. You hook up to one of those tankers, you look over, and some of them were 56, 60 models. They've got their money's worth out of those airplanes. They're all converted, 707s that turned into KC-135s or even the KC-10s. In our F-16s, our newest F-16 is a 1988 model. So again, it's highly upgraded, and the avionics are upgraded, and the targeting pods and the weaponry and all that. But we're still flying, 30-plus-year-old jets. And of course now, with the budgetary concerns, since we've given all our money away to anything other than defense, I think we'll be flying F-16s for the next, probably 20, 30 years as well. But there's issues with that when you get into survivability in some theaters. The F-16 is a giant radar magnet, so it's unsurvivable in some theaters. So that's why we're spending all our nice tax dollars on stealth F-35, F-22, which is a neat capability when it works. Yes, sir.
What about rest and recuperation?
Oh yeah, what do we do over there? What do we do for rest and recuperation over there? We sat in our trailers most of the time since you got rocket attacked about every other day. So they had some gyms over there, and of course the great thing that gets you through this is the internet. Skype. I could Skype people and Skype videos. So I could Skype the kids over there while we're getting rocket attacked, and I think the kids and all the family, we didn't even. It was transparent to them. Dad's gone for a while. Well, I'm already gone because I fly for a living. So this is just a longer trip overseas. So again, it's so nice to be able to check in at home for recreation, call your family, do that. So we email, watch movies. I watched a lot of movies when I wasn't flying or slept. That's about it. But there's nothing on Bagram. Some of the crazy people ran a marathon, like a 26-mile marathon, but I had the urge to do that, and I laid down until it went away. I'll get you in a second, John. Go ahead. Thank you.
Quick comparison, bullet points, B-17 versus F-16. Top speeds, Gs, payload, guns and shooting.
Very uncomparable, obviously. B-17, amazing airplane, incredibly slow, crew of 10, 6,000 unguided bombs, or 6,000 pounds of unguided, 12 unguided bombs. As a comparison, that's about a 200-mile-an-hour airplane. We lift off at 200 miles an hour. So the one nice thing about the F-16 is you can run away bravely. But the biggest comparison you think about, and not to mention self-defense. So the F-16, we love to say fighter pilot, and of course I'll start drooling just thinking about shooting down another airplane, which we don't get a chance to do because everybody wants to shoot down an airplane, right? But really, even though we train to it, the F-16 is primarily a bomber, so that's what we get to do. But we are self-protection. We can fight our way in, fight our way out. But the B-17 really, even though it's a flying fortress, you're kind of a sitting duck, even with all the guns around you. So, the biggest comparison with that is to think about it being 40 below, non-pressurized at 32,000 feet with the flak and the fighters. Unbelievable. So. The F-16 is air conditioned, it's pressurized, it's got a nice reclined seat. It's a Mach 2 airplane, so 2 times the speed of sound. I have not got to Mach 2. I've been to 194, which irritates me that I haven't got there yet. But it's
better tailwind.
That's right. So it advertises as a Mach 2 airplane. But yeah, the comparisons are almost completely, night and day as far as even the B-17, and I've got over 1,000 hours in the B-17. I love it. It's just an airplane that, again, I get in that airplane today, and I will think about the young guy that was 19, 20 years old that had the responsibility of 9 other crew members that was going off into combat, with the potential, of 2 or 3 of those airplanes not coming home. It's an unbelievable responsibility. So that's why we need young people to fight wars so they don't know any better. That's why, even me, as I'm getting old enough now, I'm like, hey, this isn't a good idea. So, but I'm still ignorant, as most fighter pilots, most pilots are pretty ignorant. So we're bulletproof, and we think we can do anything. But pretty amazing. John?
What was your favorite mission to fly in the F-16 and then not in the F-16?
Oh boy, that would be a hard one. Favorite mission, like in Afghanistan or just in general?
in the F-16? Whether tankering or to shooting to the gun?
I guess I would have to say, from a favorite, I had to pick one. That one, they didn't really get into the details of that, but when we checked in, so I was leading that flight that we were talking about the guys on the ground screaming for their lives. My wingman, which was the guy that was doing the other talking, and he's talking about the comms being bad, well, his crypto was down his radio, so he couldn't even communicate at all when he checked in. And when you check in to drop any kind of ordnance, you have to obviously go through a lot of steps, and sometimes, slow is fast, because they have to give you things that you have to make sure you don't mess up. And these guys are screaming from the time we checked in to the time we dropped that bomb. And when I dropped that bomb, not to get into details, there's bombs on coordinates where they give us, and then if we hit that button, they own that bomb, they bought that bomb. If it goes and kills a whole bunch of folks, that is their bomb. Well, if they give me a target and I bomb the wrong target, that's my bomb, and I hit the button. So you have to make sure you're dropping where it is. Well, these guys are screaming. At the time they called, they were weapons black. I didn't know what that meant. That means they're out of ammo. They were actually picking up rifles off of dead bodies on the ground of the enemies to shoot. And so these guys just wanted these bombs down so they can pull themselves back. Well, the guy keeps saying, it's a compound. It's an effing compound. He's screaming it over and over and over. Well, you look at a target spot in the middle of a town, they're all buildings. It's just, it's not like you can point out a compound, or you can't, what they're looking at on the ground looks different from what we're looking at in the air. So they're trying to get me to find and drop on this target where they're taking all this heavy fire from. Well, as far as I know, it's a daycare center, and so you have to be, sometimes the harder part is not dropping the bomb if you don't know where you're dropping it. So, on that mission, I would say it would probably have to be my favorite mission, even though when I hit that button and all the talk stopped, and you talk about the longest pause of eternity, because at the time, again, my wingman's not on the radio, I dropped that bomb, and everything stops. They stop talking, they stop doing anything, and finally I key the mic and I'm like, say status, say effects of bombs. And then he said, I'm not sticking my head out to find out. So I knew at least he was still alive, but they stopped taking fire. And again, so you get back, and that's pretty gratifying, because that is a mission of all the money that Uncle Sam has spent on me to learn how to fly an airplane. You look at, that's really why you're there. And you're really there, all the training you do and all that is the one time you're put into a circumstance and it comes out, and it could have been totally the other way. They could have all been killed, and we didn't do our jobs to help them. But, so that's pretty gratifying. I guess in the other airplanes, I would say the B-17 flying over the cemetery, the Madeline Cemetery, where we left so many of our 8th Air Force people buried over in England. So we flew the Liberty Bell over that in 2008, and that was a humongous honor to fly over that, to be a part of that. The original co-pilot of the Liberty Bell is buried over there at Madeline Cemetery, and again, that's pretty gratifying to be a part of that. But yeah, I have, gosh, they're all. Every time I've got an airplane came back, that was my favorite one. So as long as it brings me back in one piece. Good question. Yes, sir.
Besides the B-17, what other World War II aircraft do you currently fly?
Currently, I'm flying the B-25, the C-47 for the heavy airplanes. I fly the P-51, the Corsair, the P-40, some German airplanes, the Fowler 190. I'm in the process of checking out at the end of this month a P-47, so that's kind of a neat little rare airplane. And of course, several of the smaller airplanes, the Stearman's T-6s, and I've flown several airplanes that are kind of real airplanes, like the Japanese K torpedo bomber. I started with that, and it's a replica, but it represents the bad guys.
It'd be easier to say what planes aren't you flying.
Well, there's a lot I want to fly, so it's
right,
it's like anything in life. No matter what you're in, you're jealous. You want to fly what somebody else is flying. So I want to fly John's AT-11, but he won't let me.
On that note, good question. Thank you for that. I do want you to pull up that picture that you showed me a few minutes ago of with the 8 other B-51s in the background.
Yeah. I'll
This is the other part. I mean, he's the F-16 guy for sure, but he's also one of the absolute top Warbird pilots in the world.
That's not true, but I did pay him to say that.
That is true. That's if you haven't learned anything, he's a very humble guy. But take a look at this picture. How cool is that? Look at all the P-51s in the background.
Yeah, so this is just this year at Oshkosh, and off to my left side is a rare B model, and I'm actually flying a rare B model. It belongs to Jack Roush. If you're a NASCAR fan, Jack Roush has 2 P-51s. So And it's one of the old Crows. Off to the left side of the screen, you see a second old Crow. So Triple H Bud Anderson, he's still alive and well. He's 94 years old, so we get to go represent him with the airplanes. But what I'm looking up at is a B-25. So we're doing a photo shoot with a B-25, and this is at Oshkosh last year. And nobody's ever seen any of these because I don't ever distribute them. We have them for in case I need them at some point, but it's pretty unique. But I'm leading I think it was 8 or 9 P-51s out for this photo shoot this morning. It was Friday morning of the shoot there at Oshkosh. So it's kind of, like I said, it's an honor to be a part of it. But no matter what I'm in, again, it's just an honor to be a part of it. And fortunately, people like Jack Roush, he lets me, I guess he's got the, he thinks that I should be able to fly his airplane, so he lets me do it.
Now, how long is the list of people that he lets us fly their airplane? What, maybe
there's
1, 2 people? Maybe?
2 people, yeah.
So they're short list, like I was telling you. It's one of the best.
Yeah, but thanks for the announcement there for my greatness. But again, the nice thing about this is once you are qualified in it, so this is not so much about me, it's more about once you get qualified, it opens doors. And for the younger guys, that's the problem is there's a lot of guys that want to fly, but you have to have the background in it. So, you look at people with a heavy table time, like John Hess could climb in any one of these airplanes and go fly it today because he has the background for it. There's not many people around to do, so it gives me an opportunity to go do some of the stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily get to do. Yes, sir.
Have you flown a Warthog and how do you like it?
I have not flown a Warthog. I've flown with them a fair amount. It's an amazing airplane. We make fun of it because they have a huge problem with bird strikes. I don't know if you've heard that. The birds keep running into them from behind because they're so slow. I think for what it does, it's an amazing airplane. The reason they keep trying to ground the A-10, and they said you're done with the A-10 is because it's almost like the F-16. It is unsurvivable in any theater other than what we're fighting right now, like Afghanistan, where they're throwing rocks at us. It's so slow also, they would take off. If they would have one of these troops in contact, the problem is they take so long to get there. Well, the F-16 is very fast, so we could run over there very quickly and support them. But once an A-10 is overhead, or even better, an A-10 is an AC-130 that's got the big gun on an AC-130. I sat there and watched a C-130 just plummet some bad guys on a hill, and it was just bringing joy to my heart to watch it. And even better, the weapons controller was this female with this very soft-spoken voice and all that stuff. And these guys were like, "Shift fire north," and she's going, "Shift and fire." And so I was like, God, she sounds so nice. Well, she's killing all these people on the ground. It was just amazing. But yeah, the A-10, I've never flown one. I'm told it is a very easy airplane to fly and very, it's obviously a favorite for the guys on the ground. They can have, if an A-10 is overhead for close air support, there's, other than maybe an AC-130, that's probably the best airplane. I'd like to fly one to say I did, but it's kind of like a lot of things, I wouldn't want my friends to see me in it. I would like moped. Yes, sir.
Do you fly CAF airplanes?
I do. So I fly there. I don't do a lot of CAF. I started with them like 20 years ago, and I'm, I paid. They extorted the money out of me for life membership, and I fly their Corsair and their Red Nose T-51, and I do an air show routine, and actually I low out the air show routine. But I'm kind of a fill-in for them. I don't. I have a lot of. My real job is Delta Airlines, so that's when they make me work. But I have other computer-related stuff, like a supercomputer dork. So I do just as few of that as I can do if they need somebody to go fly. I don't seek it out, but I do. This year I went and did the Moody Air Show and did back-to-back routines in airplanes, which is kind of cool to get out of one and get in the other to go fly.
Who's Corsair, Dixie Wing?
The Dixie Wing, but I've also flown. I fly Erickson Collections, which they have a -7. It's the only one flying, and I've flown Doug Matthews -4. That's the one I did my checkout. So, and Jerry Yeagan has a F-1G, which is up in Virginia Beach, which is an amazing museum. So it's funny. I have time in 4 different types of Corsairs, but it's probably the least amount of time in any Warbird I have. So I don't have a ton of Corsair time, but I can at least. It makes it sound like I know what I'm doing because I've flown 4 different models of them. But it's a great airplane.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Liberty Foundation too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's just stop me whenever you guys get tired of hearing me talk. So the Liberty Foundation, Don Brooks, if you've heard of his name before, his father was a tail gunner in the original Liberty Bell. But Don Brooks, his claim to fame is he has the C-47. It's a real deal C-47 that was actually used in D-Day. They flew it Operation Market Garden. That's the airplane they put the skis on and went and landed on the ice cap up in Greenland to bring the P-38 out of the ice. So when people hear that expedition, they think of Pat Epps and Richard Taylor, the two guys. Well, Don was actually not only the financier, but he was actually probably the bigger name. Don is harder to go speak than I am because, you know, he is far more fascinating than I'll ever be, but he just doesn't seek it out, doesn't want to go talk about it. He invented the coal that went down in the ice 270 feet to bring the P-38 out, and he was there to get the B-17s. Well, the ice had totally crushed them. They were like 4 feet tall when they went down in there to get the B-17, but he got the guns, the top turret, a lot of parts and pieces, but he was responsible for the restoration, which was about a 12-year restoration of the Liberty Bell, which flew in 2004. At the time I was flying, I was already flying the EAA's B-17, and I'd flown Collins before that, so I already had a fair amount of B-17 time, and I'd met Don at his air show, and I'd heard about him, just like a lot of people have heard about Don Brooks, and I went down to test fly his airplane when it was ready to fly, and then he couldn't get rid of me after that, so we stayed and started it, put it out on tour. But he, just, again, fascinating guy. He's done a lot of things that most people would never even know. He restored a P-40, Warhawk P-40 that's in the Pensacola Museum, and had that donated to them down there. But his job is Napa Auto Parts. But again, his father was a tail gunner, and he wanted to do something as a tribute to his dad and all the veterans that served with him, and with the ultimate goal of taking the airplane over to Europe. And that's what we got to do in 2008. And we did it the most expensive time you could ever do it. I did the math on the gas going through Greenland. It was like $26 a gallon. But fortunately, we were only burning 200 gallons an hour, so it wasn't so bad. But yeah, and then, of course, thanks to John, everybody that flew over on the freezing trip over there, it was miserable. And it's about, I think the trip over was like 24 hours just to get the airplane over in place. So everybody that went over, nobody came back. And so I think Ron Goss might have came back with it, I can't remember. But everybody else said, okay, we had our fun. So everybody left me for dead to bring the airplane back. And thanks to John and other people who came and flew back with us. That is a lot of respect for guys that did that in World War II, because that is not a fun trip if you don't have the right. We were all in sleeping bags the whole time trying to get back. It gets quite cold.
John Pritchard, you were on that trip.
Did you did the trip back, that's right?
Yeah, I have a picture of me in a sleeping bag.
Yeah. Well, we had a World War II veteran actually on. Oh, that's right.
Brian,
what were you thinking? So going over there, we had a World War II veteran that actually he was out of Lavington, and he flew in '44. He was left seat aircraft commander, took an airplane over, and great guy. I mean, just awesome. Well, the biggest day we flew out of Goose Bay, we went into Greenland, in the Narsarsuaq, right on the tip of Greenland, and that was about a little over 4.5 hours. And all we were doing is getting gas, and I told everybody, I'm like in a Michelin suit, and everybody else is in shorts, and because we're leaving, and it's pretty warm. And I told everybody it's not going to be warm because we've got to go up. And I think I almost killed everybody on the plane on that leg. So everybody was taking their stuff off the airplane after we landed in Greenland. And I'm like, man, we're halfway there. We're going all the way to Iceland today. And so you could have seen the look on everybody's face whenever I told them to get back on that plane again, because we weren't where we were going. We flew 8.5 hours that day to go all the way into Iceland, Keflavik in Iceland, because it's miserable. I mean, and we're only at 8,000 to 10,000 feet. We're not flying at the altitudes that we flew. They flew in World War II. In fact, the turbos weren't even connected. But it still gets quite cold up there. Hour 2 or 3, that airframe gets really cold. And watching the icebergs float by and all that, it's interesting, to say the least. But the Liberty Foundation, we had an exemption to give passenger rides, which we had it until 2014. Because of the fire, now we're on delay for that. We weren't able to tour last year, but we survived just strictly based on donations. So it's a 501c3 nonprofit museum. All the money goes into the restoration. So we had the fire, and I know John talked about that. So the airplane was really badly damaged, but it is restorable. So unfortunately, we had spent $3.5 million on the first restoration. The insurance basically just covered us to get us enough of the parts and pieces back to start over. So hopefully in about 5 years and another $3.5 million later, we'll fly that airplane again and hopefully take it back to Europe. But we strictly just, we go out on tour and hopefully keep the awareness and keep enough money in to keep the airplane flying.
Are you flying any other airplanes now?
The foundation just has the C-47 and we have the Memphis Belle. So we just leased that airplane from the original family. So that airplane belonged to a gentleman, Dave Talichet, that was a 100 vet. He passed away. The airplane belongs to the family now. They're not really into aviation. They're not, it's kind of great because I thought this was a wonderful opportunity to say, hey, this is a great tribute to your dad and tour and all that. And they're like, we're just want to wonder how much money we're going to pay for this thing to go fly. So it is sad. But, again, they are keeping the airplane out there and flying. And so we leased that airplane at a premium until we can get our airplane restored. And I saw the lottery's up to like 700 million, so I've got my lottery tickets I got to buy tonight. So if I can just hit that, I can make all those problems go away. We'll just...
I think we had the Memphis Belle at Warbird.
Yes, yep. In fact, I can't remember if I took it over there or not. Who took it to Warbird weekend? Did I take it over? So yeah, I flew it over there. I don't remember. But yeah, it's a great airplane. It's a great name and obviously a great story. Even though it's not the fake Memphis Belle, I tell everyone, but it's wonderful. And Robert Morgan was actually, before he passed, he was down and was with the Liberty Belle and flew with us. And it makes me think about things where I've flown. You asked about my favorite sorties. I mean, part of this is like putting the original pilot of the Liberty Belle in the left seat, letting him go fly. I had Neil Armstrong in the left seat of the B-17. He went and flew. And it's just some of these things that I would not have had an opportunity to do. These airplanes and these museums give us the opportunity to get to meet some of these people, though, and to get to meet you guys and be involved. So it's just an amazing thing. So, and before I sign off here, I was going to say thank you to Travis. Thank you to everyone that does what they do to keep this going. So again, we look at this. This is not about me. This is not about us. This is about you. And all these museums that we're happy to be involved with. Most people don't tell their stories. And again, they say I was just doing my job. Well, we want to hear it. So I want to be on the other side and hear your stories, which are far more fascinating than I could ever be. And I have to make stuff up to be interesting. But
in the air about whether Ray was even going to be here. Ray called me last night, I don't know, 8:30, and said that he had made the decision to come speak to us because he had to turn down. He was supposed to give a big speech at a sorority house down at University of Florida, I think it was, and he chose us instead of. So that's pretty huge, Ray. We appreciate that. And I told him, actually, the way I got in here, I told him we invited all the sorority girls to come here, which was, it turns out that was a lie. Sorry. But yeah, that was, so he chose us. That's good news. Ray, we appreciate it, man. We thank you for everything that you've done in the military and in the Warbird community. Everybody's Ray's a very, very well-respected guy, and we're happy to have you. Thank you very much.